How y'all doing? It's Gospel over here. Welcome back to another Wednesday Word. Today's topic is all about trusting in God. What does it mean to trust in God? What does it look like to trust in God? You read in the Bible so many times, trust in God, trust in the Lord, yeah, all of that. And I know, just like me, you've probably asked yourself and you've probably wondered, what exactly does it mean to trust in God? What does it look like? What does that entail and everything? And that's what we'll be talking about today. I think one of the greatest examples of trust in God is Job, found in the book of Job. I feel like we all know the story of Job. A lot of the times this message has been taught on the perspective of being tested by God. But today I want us to look at it in terms of Job's side, learning to trust God when you've lost everything. I think Job is a very, very good example of trusting in God and learning to trust in God and what trusting God looks like. Job lost his children, he lost his wealth, he lost his health, he lost his property, he lost his livestock, he just lost everything. And people all around him kept telling him to rebuke God and to disown God and to curse God, because why, all of a sudden all the things are taken away. But in the midst of losing everything, one thing that Job did not lose was his faith in God and his trust in God. Because even though he lost everything, he still chose to remain faithful to God. Even when everyone else was telling him to curse God and everyone was telling him to basically deny God, he chose to remain faithful to God and to trust what God was doing. Even though he did not understand what was happening, even though he did not understand, although he was a righteous man, all of a sudden all these bad things are happening to him. Even though he didn't understand, he still chose to trust God in the midst of all of that. And that's what trusting God looks like. That's exactly what trusting God looks like. That even when you've lost everything, and even when you're being attacked, and even when you're going through the most and you don't understand what's happening, you don't understand the pressure, you don't understand the attacks, you don't understand. You told yourself that I've been following the 10 commandments, I've been reading the word, I've been praying, but all of a sudden all this bad stuff is happening to me. Even when you don't understand why everything is happening to you, we stick by God and we trust that he would never do anything that would harm us, like he says in Jeremiah 29:11. Trusting in God is not the same as trusting in other people, because people can let you down. Even when you put your trust in them, people can and will let you down. Trusting in God is very, very different. It goes beyond the dictionary definition of what trust is. Trusting in God is finding confidence in God, and is finding security in God, and knowing very well that what he says will happen. Even though I don't understand, even though it feels impossible, it will happen. Trusting in God means that you believe in his promises in all circumstances, even in situations where the evidence seems to be contrary. So it's trusting in God in all circumstances, in all situations, even when the situation says that's not gonna happen. That ain't it. Trusting in God means you put your faith in him, you put your belief in him, you rely on him with everything inside of you, even when circumstances look different, even when circumstances say something different. It's trusting in God even when you don't understand. It's trusting in God when your situations and your circumstances say that's not gonna happen. It's trusting in God when you don't know what the next step is. It's believing in God and knowing that what he says will come true. It's relying on him, believing in him. Just like love, trusting in God and trusting in anyone is a choice that you make. You choose to trust someone else, and whether or not they live up to that trust, that's up to them. So when it comes to trusting God as well, it's the same thing. You choose to trust God. You choose to believe that what he says is true. You choose to believe that what he says will come true. And if you feel like, you've been having difficulty in trusting God, there are a number of ways that you can learn to trust God. The first one is by reading the word. Reading the word is very, very important. Reading the word and praying is very, very important, especially when it comes to a relationship with God. It's how we strengthen our bond with Him. It's how we strengthen our relationship with Him. It's how we strengthen our knowledge of Him and His promises, and strengthen our knowledge of His will and who He is. And in reading your word, you get to remind yourself of His promises, and you also read what He's done for other people, and that encourages you as well, because there are a lot of people in the Bible who went through the same things that we go through, just that it was different because of the time, and different because maybe of the method of whatever. But in the Bible are so many examples of people that go through the same things that we go through, and by reading their stories, we get encouraged in knowing that we can trust in God. He will come through, because He has already come through in the Bible, and He will come through for us right now. Another way that you can learn to trust God and strengthen your trust in God is to confess to Him. When you find someone that you can trust, it's very easy for you to tell them what's in your heart. It's very easy for you to tell them what you're struggling with, and it's the same with God. Yeah, it's the same with God. Choose to trust God and start confessing to Him. Start telling Him everything that's on your mind. If you're disappointed at the fact that He didn't come through in an earlier prayer request, then tell Him that. Tell Him that. Just put yourself in a situation where you are vulnerable with Him, and you let everything that's in your heart out. So when you confess to God and you let Him know, it's your way of letting Him into your life, and it's your way of beginning to trust in Him, and beginning to rely on Him, and beginning to believe in Him and depend on Him. Another way that you can learn to trust in God and strengthen your trust in God is by spending time with Him. Like I said, with the reading the word and praying is very important that we spend time with God as well, because that's where we get to know God. That's where we get to receive everything that we need from God. And in spending time with God, we start to see things differently. We start to see the circumstances differently. We start to see our situations differently. We start to see our troubles differently. We shouldn't let what happens to us define our perspective of God, but we need to let God define our perspective of our circumstances. And that's what happens when we spend time with Him. When you spend time with God, you begin to see things the way that He would see them, and not how you see them, and not how the world has conditioned you to see them. When you spend time with God, it makes it easier for you to trust God, because you are seeing it from His perspective. So then you understand that what you're going through is not there to harm you, but it's there to prepare you for what's to come. And another way that you can learn to trust God and to strengthen your trust in God is by looking for things that you're grateful for in your life. Every single day is a gift to us. There's always something that we can be grateful for in each and every day. You may not see it because you're so focused on your problems and your troubles, but there's always something that you can be grateful for in your life. So when you look for things that you can be grateful for in your life, then you start to see God moving in your life. You start to see that He actually does move in my life, and that can strengthen your trust in Him, and that can help you learn to trust in Him. There's always something that we can be grateful for. The fact that you opened up your eyes this morning, that's something to be grateful for. Not everyone woke up this morning. The fact that you have a car to drive around in and to transport you to places, that's something to be grateful for. Not everyone can afford cars. The fact that you have a job, that's something to be grateful for. The fact that you have a family, that's something to be grateful for. There's always something to be grateful for. God is always moving. God is always moving. And depending on where our focus is on, that's what we're gonna see the most. So if your focus is on God, then you'll see Him moving in your life. But if your focus is on your troubles, that's all you're gonna see. And how you know that you're starting to trust God and that you are trusting God is in your life is that you see yourself running to Him every time something happens in your life. You see yourself running to Him every time there's a difficult situation in your life or life starts getting hard. The first thing that you do is you go straight to God in prayer, in reading His word, and spending time with Him. That He is the one that you go to when life gets hard. He is the one that you run to when things start looking left, He is the one you go to when life is just pressuring you and you feel all these attacks around you. Is that you run to him, you read his word, and you're praying to him. That's when you know that you're trusting him, because you are relying on him and you are depending on him, and your security is found in him only. You know that the only way that I can get out of this, or whatever, everything that I need comes from him. That's how you know that you are starting to trust in God, and you are trusting in God. Is that you start to understand that everything that you need is found in him. You are relying on him, you are depending on him. He is your lifeline, and he is your everything. So that when you lose everything, you know that I still have God,